Welcome back, everyone, to the Digital Dive, episode 9. Today, we're strapping on our digital boots and hitting the pitch because we're talking about Rugby 25. Finally. Feels like, I don't know about you, but it feels like we've been waiting forever for a new rugby game, and it's finally here.
It certainly has been a long wait, a long time coming,
Right.
especially since the last one, Rugby 22. Let's just say it didn't exactly set the world on fire. So there's a lot riding on Rugby 25 to deliver.
Yeah. A lot riding on it. The hype is real, and so are the questions. I mean, like, what was with the delay, and why did they even change the name? I mean, did they completely revamp the gameplay, or is this just like a roster update with a fresh coat of paint?
Yeah, good questions. Let's tackle the delay first. I think the developers have been pretty open about it. They've said it really boiled down to the massive undertaking of securing over 150 licensing deals. Think about it. Every team, every plan, all those logos and kits. I mean, that's a legal mountain to climb. On top of that, they were busy flying around the globe, using state-of-the-art technology to scam players
Yeah.
for those ultra-realistic in-game graphics.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So it's not like they were just sitting around twiddling their thumbs or anything. But what about the name change? Why go from Rugby 24 to Rugby 25?
Well, those delays, as understandable as they were, they pushed the release date further and further out, and they ended up smack dab in the middle of the 2024-2025 seasons. So rather than having a game called Rugby 24 launching in 2025, they decided to embrace the shift and rename it Rugby 25.
Right, yeah, I can see the logic there. Keeps things accurate, avoids confusion. But let's be honest, what everyone really cares about is the game itself. So what can players actually expect when they boot up Rugby 25?
Well, from the looks of it, they've really gone for breadth and depth. We're talking over 140 international teams, including, big names like South Africa, France, and England, plus over 150 clubs from top competitions, like the top E14, Premiership, and the URC. 11 major competitions in total. They've really tried to capture the whole world of rugby union.
Wow, that's impressive. And I hear they've been getting feedback from players during an early access period.
Yeah, for about 8 months, dedicated players got a sneak peek and could provide feedback directly to the developers. It's a smart move. It shows they're committed to creating a game that the community wants and hopefully avoid some of the pitfalls that plagued Rugby 22.
Yeah, speaking of Rugby 22, were there any major features or mechanics that really stood out to you as being different this time around?
Well, from what I've seen in the trailers and early gameplay footage, one of the biggest changes seems to be the rucking system. It looks much more involved, more strategic, requiring players to think about positioning, timing, and player strength. It's not just about mashing buttons anymore.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, more realistic rucking system could really change the flow of the game. What about other aspects of the gameplay, like passing and kicking? Any noticeable improvements there?
Yeah, they're saying they've refined the passing mechanics for more control and precision, which would be a welcome change, I think. And they've also overhauled the kicking game, giving players a wider variety of kicks to choose from and a more realistic flight model. So hopefully no more ridiculously overpowered spiral bombs from halfway. But I wouldn't bet on it.
Uh-huh. That's good to hear. And what about the artificial intelligence? Have they made any improvements there?
From what I've gathered, yeah, the AI has been significantly improved. Opponents are supposed to make more intelligent decisions, adapt to your tactics, and generally provide a much tougher challenge. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out in practice.
Yeah, it's always a good sign when the AI can keep you on your toes. Makes the game much more engaging.
Absolutely. And don't forget, there's an official launch trailer out now for viewers to check out. It's a great way to get a quick look at the game in action and see if it, piques your interest.
Great point. So the game is out, the trailer is out there.
Yeah.
Boom. What's the early word on the street? Is Rugby 25 living up to the hype?
Well, the full reviews are just starting to trickle in, and the player reactions are all over the map. It's too early to give a definitive verdict. Some people are loving it, some are not so impressed, and others are still on the fence. I guess we'll have to wait and see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious to see how it's received by both, diehard rugby fans and gamers who are maybe new to the sport. A game like this has the potential to really revitalize the rugby gaming scene. But it has to deliver on its promises.
It's true. There's a lot of potential here, but only time will tell if Rugby 25 can truly capture the spirit of the sport and become a lasting success.
Well, that brings us to the end of part 1 of our Rugby 25 breakdown. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to break down the gameplay in more detail and try to answer the big question. Is Rugby 25 a try or a penalty?
Welcome back. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty. How does Rugby 25 actually play? A deep dive into any sports game has to go beyond the roster and the graphics.
Exactly. I'm itching to hear about how the gameplay actually feels. Yeah, all the bells and whistles are great, but if the gameplay is like a wet sock, nobody's going to stick around.
Yeah, true. From what I've gathered, early impressions suggest a real focus on capturing those small details that make rugby unions so unique. One of the things that's getting a lot of buzz is the revamped rucking system. Remember those frustrating moments in older games where you just mash buttons and hope for the best?
Oh, tell me about it. It felt like I was playing whack-a-mole instead of, competing for possession.
Exactly. Well, it seems they've really tried to make the rucking system more strategic in Rugby 25. Positioning your players correctly, timing your entries, and using your players' individual strength all play a crucial role now.
That's a welcome change.
Yeah.
A more realistic and challenging rucking system could really make the game feel more dynamic and less like a random button mashing contest. What about the passing and kicking? Those are pretty fundamental to rugby, to say the least.
Yeah, of course. They've made some significant tweaks there as well. The passing mechanics are supposedly more precise, giving you greater control over the weight and direction of your passes. And the kicking game, well, that's got a major overhaul too. Players now have a wider array of kicks to choose from. Grubbers, chips, up and unders, you name it.
Hold on, so does this mean we can finally say goodbye to those ridiculously overpowered spiral bombs? The ones that could clear the entire pitch. Those were getting a bit ridiculous.
I wouldn't count on it. I mean, there will always be those clutch kicks that defy physics. But from what I've seen, the new kicking system seems to strike a good balance between realism and fun. And the flight model is more realistic. So you can't just launch the ball blindly anymore and expect it to land perfectly.
That's good news for those of us who like a bit of strategy in our kicking game. Speaking of strategy, what about the AI? Is it any smarter this time around? Or are we still going up against opponents who run predictable lines and make the same mistakes over and over?
Yeah, no, that was one of the biggest complaints about Rugby 22. And it sounds like they've really addressed it in this version. Players are reporting that the AI is much improved. Opponents are adapting to your tactics, using different formations, and making more intelligent decisions on the field.
So you're saying the AI might actually pose a challenge this time. That's music to my ears. Nothing makes a sports game feel stale faster than just predictable opponents.
Right, exactly. You want that feeling of playing against a real team, not just a bunch of robots going through the motions.
Okay, so the game looks great. The gameplay sounds promising. But what about the actual content? What kind of game modes can players dive into?
Well, you've got your standard exhibition matches, of course, where you can pick any team and go head-to-head against the AI or a friend on the couch. They've also brought back the career mode, which was a big hit in previous versions. This time around, it sounds even more in-depth.
Oh yeah, career mode was always a blast.
Yeah.
Creating your own player, working your way up the ranks, striving for rugby glory. What's not to love?
Exactly. And you can also take the reins of an entire team, managing their finances, scouting and recruiting players, and guiding them to championships. It's a real management sim within the game.
Wow, they really did go all out with the game modes. So on top of all that, there's online multiplayer, right? Got to be able to test your skills against the best in the world.
Of course. Online multiplayer is a must-have for any modern sports game, and Rugby 25 is no exception. You can challenge players from around the globe in ranked and unranked matches, climb the leaderboards, and prove you're the ultimate rugby champion.
So with all these improvements and features, would you say Rugby 25 is shaping up to be a worthy successor to the throne of rugby gaming?
It's showing a lot of promise, that's for sure. It looks good, it sounds like it plays well, and it's packed with content. But as with any new game, there will be things that need tweaking, bugs to iron out, and features that could be expanded upon.
That's a fair point. No game is perfect right out of the gate. But it sounds like the developers are committed to supporting the game post-release and listening to player feedback.
Absolutely. They've been pretty transparent throughout the development process, and they've shown a willingness to engage with the community that gives me hope that they'll continue to refine and improve the game over time.
So taking all this into consideration, what's your overall impression of Rugby 25? Is it a try, a penalty, or somewhere in between?
Based on everything I've seen and heard so far, I'd say it's definitely leaning towards a try. It's got the potential to be a real game changer for rugby gaming. But it's still early days. We need to see how it performs in the wild, how the community responds, and how the developers support it over the long term.
Fair enough. And on that note, we'll wrap up part 2 of our Rugby 25 breakdown. But hold on tight. Yeah. Because we're coming back with part 3, where we'll tackle the big question. Can Rugby 25 revitalize the rugby gaming scene? And we'll delve into some of the challenges and criticisms that the game is facing.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back. We've covered a lot of ground with Rugby 25. But let's face it, no game is perfect. There are always going to be some areas where maybe they could have done better.
Right.
Or features that, fans wish were included.
That's right, yeah. It's important to acknowledge both the good and the bad, to have balanced perspective. And from what I've seen, Rugby 25 is definitely not immune to criticism.
So let's dive into some of those criticisms then. What are people saying? What are the biggest drawbacks?
One of the most common complaints I've seen revolves around the graphics. Some players are saying that while they're a definite improvement over previous rugby games, they don't quite stack up to other top-tier sports titles out there.
Interesting. I thought the graphics looked pretty slick in the trailers, especially the player models. What specifically are people finding fault with?
Well, it seems like the environments and stadiums aren't quite as detailed as some players were hoping for. The lighting and textures in some areas are also being criticized for looking a bit, well, dated.
So not quite the graphical leap forward that some were anticipating. I guess graphical fidelity is a moving target, right? Always pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Exactly. And of course, everyone has different expectations and preferences when it comes to graphics. What one person finds immersive and realistic, another might find underwhelming.
Fair enough. What other criticisms are popping up?
Another area that's drawing some flack is the commentary.
The commentary. Yeah, that can either make or break a sports game. What are people saying about it?
Well, it seems like the commentary in Rugby 25 is a bit of a mixed bag. Some players are finding it repetitive and lacking in energy. Others are saying it's inaccurate at times, not really reflecting what's actually happening on the pitch.
Yeah, that's always jarring. You pull off this amazing try-saving tackle, and the commentators are talking about something completely unrelated. It really breaks the immersion.
Right. And then there are those moments when the same phrases get repeated over and over again, which can get grating after a while. It makes you wonder if they recorded enough lines for the commentary team.
Yeah, it sounds like the commentary could use some polishing. Hopefully the developers will address these issues in future updates.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. Commentary is one of those things that can be tweaked and improved relatively easily.
So besides graphics and commentary,
Yeah.
are there any other areas where Rugby 25 is falling short?
Some players are expressing disappointment with the lack of innovation in certain areas. They feel like the game is a bit too safe, too similar to previous rugby titles. It doesn't really push the boundaries of what a rugby game can be.
So more of an evolution than a revolution.
That seems to be the consensus among some players, yeah. I mean, it's a solid rugby game, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't necessarily bring anything groundbreaking to the table.
Right, that's understandable. It's always a tricky balance for developers, isn't it? I mean, they want to innovate and introduce new ideas, but they also don't want to alienate their core audience by changing things too drastically.
Exactly. It's a tough line to walk. But I do think there's room for Rugby 25 to grow and evolve. Maybe future updates will bring some of those groundbreaking features that players are hoping for.
Fingers crossed. I'm optimistic. After all, this is just the first step in what will hopefully be a long and successful journey for Rugby 25.
Absolutely. And despite these criticisms, it's important to remember that there's still a lot to love about this game. At its heart, it's a fun and engaging rugby experience that really captures the essence of the sport.
That's what matters most at the end of the day.
Right. And I think it has the potential to revitalize the rugby gaming scene. It's a well-made game that appeals to both, hardcore rugby fans and newcomers alike.
So to wrap things up, would you say Rugby 25 is a game that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Absolutely. If you're a rugby fan or simply looking for a fun and challenging sports game, then Rugby 25 is definitely worth checking out. Just be aware that it's not a perfect game, and there are areas where it could be improved.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Do your research, watch some gameplay footage, and decide for yourself if it's the right game for you.
Exactly. And most importantly, have fun out there in the virtual pitch.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Rugby 25. We'll catch you next time for another exciting episode.